Welcome to the Rotary Club of Beaumont. Together we see a world where people unite and take action to create lasting change across the globe, in our communities, and in ourselves. Those on Zoom are asked to mute your microphone. Please take a minute. Oh, she added just a twist in here for me today. Take a minute to check in on the Rotary Facebook page, show everybody that we're back in business here. Today our invocation is going to be led by District 5910 Governor Becky Mason, and then our pledges will be led by Jennifer Gregory, Human Resources Officer, Beaumont Housing Authority. Becky.
Thank you, Cindy. And I don't know how many of you are like this, but I'm just like, okay, now what do we do here? We haven't been out much. So glad to see you all. It's great to be here today. And please join me in the invocation. Dear Lord, you've given most of mankind a strong desire to do good, to be honest, to serve others, and to faithfully fulfill their obligations to their neighbors. Help us as Rotarians and humans to do good. Help us as Rotarians and humans to be honest and ethical in all our dealings. Help us as Rotarians and humans to serve others. And help us as Rotarians and humans to faithfully fulfill our obligations as neighbors to our community, our nation, and the world, in spite of any obstacles they may face and we may face. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, if you could please join me with the pledges to the United States and Texas flags. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you. We have some guests joining us today. I want to introduce them. Troy Gray and Jessica Tubbs, guests of Ty Kudrain. Jock Godney. Two guests. Thank you, Ty. Jock Godney. Thank you. He's standing with Jennifer Gregory. Gagne. I got the job. So happy to get the job. It's Vernon. Y'all, I don't know if you remember Vernon's year, but he had some pronunciation issues. Put him on stage and look what happened. Okay. Vernon Pierce did bring a very special guest with him today. We have Greg Bostwick. He's in the back. Welcome, Greg. Jay Wilson has his dad, Jay Wilson Sr. So good to see you again. And then Ann Scoggin, who I hadn't seen in so long, I was so glad to see her come in the room, brought Randy Reese. So welcome to our guest. Now, just for a little bit of club business, we didn't get to do up Becky's district conference thing like we really wanted to. So since I knew she was coming today, I have a little Becky. Vernon Pierce is going to deliver you a bouquet of happy flowers that recognize all that he did this year, have done this year, and continue to do to make district conferences as good of a conference as we were able to make it. And I did bring my book. If you were able to join us on district conference, the first day Dr. Sylvia Whitlock spoke to us, and you could just send her an email and she would send you a signed copy of her book. And it was so funny because I emailed her and I said, Dr. Whitlock, I would like a copy of your book. How do I get the $20 to you? She said, oh, I'll get it in the mail. When you get it, just send me a check. It's like, that's okay. The other thing I did from district conference was order my Orby Bear, because in 2022, the international conference is going to be in Houston. So that is an opportunity for us to really see what this whole big thing is all about. For those of us who have not had the opportunity to go to New Orleans or Australia, or we can go online this year to Taiwan. But anyway, so that's coming up in 2022 of June. Plenty of opportunities also if you want to volunteer. They have activities throughout that whole week. I think they're trying to get Minute Maid Park for our opening and our closing. They're going to close off the whole Discovery Green area downtown, and there's supposed to be like, oh, it was a large number of people that are planning on being there. So that's something to look forward to. But thank you, Becky, for all you've done this year. And I know it hasn't been the year you imagined, but you've helped to make it wonderful. Another person who I want to recognize from District Conference is John Quigley. He had his name added to the District 5910 Roll of Fame. So John, if you can, I know I saw John here. There he is. We'll get him up here so you can see him in person. John has been a longtime member of our club. He's been a past president, and this year we were able to recognize him and honor him for his work throughout the district and our club throughout all these years. Thank you. We're a little out of practice. Okay, now to kick off our NEST campaign, the one and only Kevin Reed, campaign chair.
Thank you, Madam President. And there's some glitches in the mic, so can you hear me? So I want to talk a little bit about the NEST program that we're doing at Martin Elementary. And but before I do that, take us back to, I'm going to talk without the mic. Is that okay? In the mic? Okay, well, I'll deal with the cut down. So, oh, wonderful. You want it? So while he's doing that, is this any better? Hey, that's awesome. Thank you, Larry. Okay, so apologize to my Zoom people. I'll start over. So I want you guys to take yourselves back to when you were in elementary school and coming out of kindergarten and remembering some of those things that you got to play with. I know in my case, I was excited about the little trikes they had with the 3 wheels and the blocks and the big, huge rubber bouncy balls. And then, of course, we had our little libraries where we got to all go line up and go down the hallway and get our books. And those were great times and a lot of good memories of those. But to think back then, some of the technology things that we have today, if we would have had those back then, boy, where would we be? So I said all that to say this: we have the opportunity to put together some items for the Martin Elementary School with the NEST program. And on the screen here, I believe. I'm going to look at my iPad so I'm not distracted, which I'm easily distracted sometimes. But we have gotten with Lamar, and they have a room picked out for Martin Elementary to go in and paint. And it's a really exciting adventure to be involved with. And if you scroll down to, I'm going to refer to as platinum level, gold levels. All these are the levels of sponsorship. But the very first screen is that really fancy interactive learning screen. That is my most excited thing. I would have had that when I was a kid, boy, we would be in trouble. I would actually know how to use an iPad by now. So, but really, we're giving these kids an opportunity to take technology and some learning experiences to the next level by supporting this. And that's just one of the highlights. I've only was given 3 minutes, so I'm going to just pick mine. But if we could all come together and locate some sponsors and people that would jump on board to help put this together for Martin Elementary, that would be really awesome. Our goal for this entire project is $15,000. And I think that's pretty easy. There are several ways you can donate. As you see on the screen, we have a platinum level, which those will be the levels that actually contribute towards that interactive screen. That screen alone is about $8,500, but it's in some of the elementary schools already and being used, and the learning has definitely increased, and the kids are very excited to get to partake in this. We have the other levels, which you can see, and you can go to our chamber site, or Rotary, I'm sorry, chamber. Go to our Rotary site, as Jackie has it up here. There'll be lots of information put out. Also, you can see part of our NEST committee, which I'm the chair. And if my committee group will stand up, we have Sherry Pierce, we have Amy, and we have Amanda, and we have Dee, and my wife, who couldn't be here, are all going to be our go-to people to see about raising these funds. Thank you, ladies, so much. If you have any questions, just please see one of us, and I think that's where I'm supposed to end, right? All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. This is an exciting project. Over the summer, hopefully we'll start to get actually to work on the project, and they'll start with the painting, and then you saw some pictures where several of our members in the past have helped with other nests around the community, putting together the furniture and getting it all in place. So 4 different levels that you can contribute to. It's all on our Rotary Club of Beaumont website page. Click a button, and it's very easy to do. And your company logo can live in eternity on that web page. So where we're not able to put the big full logo of your company inside the nest, we are able to use all your graphics and anything you would want to put that particular towards your company on our web page. So check that out. And thank you, Kevin, and your crew for getting this all together. To introduce our speaker today, we have past President Vernon Pierce, Commissioner of Precinct 1.
I kind of felt like I need to stand up here and introduce myself. I haven't been here very often. Hope you'll accept me. It's my pleasure to introduce Chris Hebert. Chris, say something so your face will come up on the screen. Say hello. Chris, you're on mute. There you go.
I had to unmute myself, Vernon. Here I am.
That's Chris. How many people recognize Chris? We were talking yesterday and asked, how many presentations have you made to this club? And we've come up with 15 years to make a presentation. He's kind of like Santa Claus. This is his busy time of the year. Yesterday, I was trying to talk to him, get prepared for this. He was involved with industry in a storm drill. This morning, he gave the same talk to another group, and he's given our talk to us. Chris has said to me many times that if some reason he can't, that he can't have vacation days, get off, he'll take vacation, come here, because he loves being with Beaumont Rotary Club. Chris is a graduate of Texas A&M with a degree in meteorology. He's a little bit younger than my friend Greg Boswick in the back, but they did go to school together and they've worked together. And I'll have to tell you, when Joe Domino and I were looking at storms coming when we worked for Entergy, it was reassuring that we could call on both these men who gave us excellent guidance and excellent prediction so we can make good decisions. Well, Chris was supposed to send me his resume. He never got it to me, so some of the stuff may not be true, I'm about to say. Chris works for StormGeo as their lead hurricane forecaster, and on the other part of the year, he works as forecasting cyclones. As well as he predicts fog for the maritime industry and ports. Many local industries use Chris to provide forecasts to them. Imagine those decisions those plant managers are having to make. They see something coming in from the Gulf. Do I shut down, close my plant down, evacuate my employees, or should I ride it out? And they need good, solid advice that Chris provides. Last year, we came very close with Hurricane Laura and Delta. So, Chris, thank you for pushing them off of us.
Right.
So last year, I gave Chris a certificate for thanking him for having the most talks of any other speaker. And so this year, Chris, I know you're not here, but I have another certificate for you. I'll figure out how to get to you. The certificate is a certificate of appreciation, 15 years of being our Rotary speaker, the most requested speaker in our club. Whereas the Rotary Club of Beaumont is over 100 years old, and Chris has been the most requested speaker and provided more presentations than any other speaker. That's my count. Y'all proved it wrong. This certificate hereby expresses our deepest appreciation. P.S. Chris, no more hurricanes. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Hebert.
All right. Can y'all see my screen now?
Yes.
You should see me up there. Yes, I've been doing this since 1980, so this isn't my first year. You might have noticed we had a few storms last year. We had 30 named storms. Now that's a record. We had 28 in 2005, but 30 this past season. A number of them were short-lived and were out to sea, and we really didn't have much activity out here east the Caribbean. Those long track hurricanes that we usually see coming out here, we didn't have any of those. That's not necessarily a good thing, because when they develop farther east, they typically go out to sea and want to turn northward. So they didn't develop till they got to the Western Caribbean Sea, which is why we got all those storms along the Gulf Coast this past year. Those are all the hurricane landfalls. This is our forecast from last May. We were looking at above normal number of storms, yeah, but we weren't looking for 30 named storms. Nobody was looking for that many. So it was quite a bit more number of named storms, but we hit the areas. We thought just about everywhere would be above normal, except we weren't correct over here. There really wasn't any big threat to the islands in the Eastern Caribbean Sea. This area called the Main Development Region was rather hostile last year, and there are signs that it may well be hostile again this year. That's not necessarily a good thing for us, because if they don't develop farther east, they tend to come farther west and affect the Caribbean and possibly Mexican or U.S. coastline. Just about everybody got in on the hurricane love last year for tropical storms, hurricane watches, warnings, storm surge warnings. Everybody except Tallahassee over here, it looks like, we're in the warnings, and all the way up through Maine down to Brownsville. So they just affected everyone last year. We had a lot of short-lived storms out there. A number of them lasted some, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 lasted, 5 lasted 1 day or less. So we're getting better at identifying weak, short-lived systems out over the ocean, and we're naming those now that we didn't name in the past. It wasn't until Hannah here, and I'll tell you about that later, that the first hurricane of the season, the H storm in July. So we went for a lot of short-lived, weak storms before that. I'm not going to go through every storm in detail, just briefly some of the ones that touched the United States. Faye moved up the East Coast. I can't see that. Arthur, I can't see the top of my screen. Arthur developed off the East Coast early on in May and then raised the coast. Didn't cause much impact there. Faye, I can hide this off the screen here. Oh, well, that's right. I'll see what these are. Tropical Storm Faye moved out of the Gulf as a disturbance, briefly developed, caused a bit of wind and rain on the East Coast. Not extreme amount, heavily amount of rain there, just 3 to 5 inches generally. A few places got a tad more, but not a lot of impact there with Faye. The first hurricane of the season was Hannah. and that was in the latter part of July. It moved into the coast. You can see it had a nice looking eye there at landfall, meaning it was a fairly strong hurricane as it moved into the coast. Category 1 hurricane, 90-mile-per-hour winds. It was the first hurricane of the year, formed on the 25th, I believe, of July. And I've been tracking the first hurricane of the year. And since 1950, we've had some that have happened before June 1 that developed by the Azores in 2016, Alex. But for the most part, hurricanes are confined to the post-June 1st time period. And actually, since 1950, just about a day or two later on average of the first formation of the first hurricane. And so the Hurricane Center's talking about moving the start of the season to May 15th versus June 1st, but hurricanes aren't necessarily forming any earlier. We're naming some systems we didn't name in the past early on before June these days. So they're at least starting their outlook on the 15th, the daily outlook, and we've always done that, so no change from us. Hannah produced a lot of rainfall in the lower valley, over a foot of rain down there just around the Brownsville area. That's my favorite name. I've been waiting for this one for 12 years, actually. Isaias replaced Ike in 2008. It's pronounced Isaias, as we all probably have learned by now. It was a hurricane as it moved past Dominican Republic. It developed a hurricane by the Bahamas, weakened and strengthened a bit, and it caused some significant impacts across the Carolinas. 4.8 billion in damage, and it caused 10 direct deaths along the U.S., and most of those were, I believe, due to flooding. There were some tree injuries, I believe, as well. So it certainly caused some issues on the East Coast. Rainfall-wise, a bit of heavy rain over in Maryland, but for the most part, not extreme amounts of rain along its path, 3 to 6 inches in general. Then you might remember this little storm right here, Hurricane Laura, nearly a Category 5 at this point, heading right in towards southwest Louisiana. That was, of course, the big one of last year. Started out rather innocuously over there by Africa as we identified disturbance number 33 of the year. This was going to be Marco in advance of it, the 31 over here. We have Josephine we're tracking, that's going out to sea. We're not worried about that. We're watching stuff off the southeast U.S. coast for possible development there, but this was going to be the problem. Typically, it takes about 2 weeks for a storm or a disturbance there to reach the United States coastline. And that was Laura's track. It became a tropical storm as it approached the islands. Couldn't really intensify until it got past the Dominican Republic. Became a hurricane, then a major hurricane in the Gulf, and of course moved inland on the 26th, late on the 26th, early on the 27th of August. There it is, as it was by the Dominican Republic, and there's Marco out in advance. The models are really having a field day with these two. At one point, they had them rotating around each other in the Gulf of Mexico. That wasn't a fun forecast. Fortunately, well, Marco died out, and it was made a little easier to forecast Laura in its wake. And one of the tools, and I've talked about this before with your group, that we developed is an ensemble-based called track guidance. We take the 51 European models, now 30 American and 20 Canadian ensembles in the operational, merge them all together, now 104 total tracks, and it comes up with a more likely scenario where the storm's going to go. And from over Haiti here in Dominican Republic, it did a pretty good job of indicating where the storm was going to make landfall. Landfall is just a little bit east of that. A lot of models combined together is generally better than any one model alone when forecasting storms. We can see on the couple of days later when it moved toward western Cuba, all the purple tracks in here are the European model ensemble members. And all the greens are American, all the yellows are Canadian. You can see that at one point here, we were getting pretty concerned. Now, I was talking to Greg Bostwick. I know he's there in the audience today. Greg and I were talking about this, how the models had shifted. They're actually centering it over toward Galveston Bay at one point as the storm was entering the Gulf of Mexico. So that was going to be possibly a big concern for the upper Texas coast. If it tracks west of you, you never want a hurricane to move inland to the west of you, because that's a lot worse than moving into the east of you. The guidance had shifted from, the guidance had shifted from, let me go back there. My screen is delaying on me when I hit the go button. There we go. Shifted from over here to over toward about Houston. That wouldn't have been good for the upper Texas coast at all either. But fortunately, it did change back to the other side. We didn't ever adjust our track any farther west than here, which would have been really terrible for Beaumont, Port Arthur area. But that's as far west as we ever got with our forecast. There you can see it coming up to the coast. It was peaking in intensity at just about Category 5 right here, about 150 to 155 miles per hour. Category 5 is 157 miles per hour. So it was really strong. Now, it wasn't a very large hurricane. And that's fortunate for west of the landfall point as well, because you didn't get the as strong a wind or rainfall on the western side all the way toward Beaumont, Port Arthur, as you would with a larger hurricane like, say, Ike in 2008. There you can see it at landfall. The eye wall is where all the strong winds are, and that's the eye wall right in here, just kind of grays over here toward orange. So you're generally outside the sustained hurricane force winds for Laura. You had some gusts up there near hurricane force, but for the most part, the very strong winds were confined to this eye wall in here. And there were some strong winds. The winds, if you've been through hurricane now, and if you've been in Port Arthur for a while or anywhere on the Gulf Coast, they're very gusty in hurricane. And look at this gust here. This is 154 mile per hour at this point here, but just a few minutes before it was 50 miles per hour. So it's gone from 50 to 150 miles per hour over a span of a few minutes, which is quite significant. And that's what caused a lot of the wind damage there on the coast. This was very, very preliminary. I got this, I think I picked this up just about a week or so after Laura moved inland, just showing the peak gusts that were observed. And you can see some of the reports on these stations from, that's 28 here, 45 there. So they're not quite drawn perfectly, but Beaumont, Port Arthur over here is 74 at the airport, miles per hour, 58 miles per hour here, just a little northwest of there. So just, there was some gusting up to hurricane force reported at the airport there. So you did have some hurricane force winds there, but they extended all the way up into northern Louisiana, the strong tropical storm force winds. And your poor Lake Charles radar suffered during Laura. That's what the radar looked like after Laura. Completely destroyed the radome. But I do have good news for you. It's back. It's back now. We got a new radome. New radar is all repaired now. And they put it all together in January, February. So it's ready to go for this year, but hopefully we don't need it for any hurricanes or anything. Rainfall with the Laura, not a whole lot. If this is 1 to 3 inches in here, that's 1 to 3 inches across Beaumont, Port Arthur with a hurricane moving inland not too far away. That's not a lot of rainfall. So it didn't have too much of a western side. And the eastern side, 10 to 12 inches. It's a little bit below average in terms of rainfall in general. It was a smaller than average storm. Then we had Sally. Sally was a storm that moved across southern Florida as a tropical disturbance, became a tropical storm there by South Florida. And the track is really smoothed out in here on this graphic here, but it moved in as a Category 2 hurricane. At the time, it's not the only hurricane we were watching. There were 4 others out here, and there might have been some in the West Pacific we were monitoring as well. So it was quite a busy time. This haziness you see up there is some of the dust from the California wildfires that was blowing all the way up into Canada at that time ahead of Sally. Now, people ask, can't you tell just exactly where this hurricane is going to make landfall? Look at what it's doing here. Is it going to hit Louisiana? Well, it suddenly starts moving west. Maybe it's going over here. And then suddenly starts moving east. Well, maybe it's coming over here. And then it goes back to the west. So it's just zigzagging through the northern Gulf. We can't tell where exactly this thing is going to make landfall from about a day and a half out before it moves inland. Finally did move inland here in Alabama, and it produced some heavy rain. That's 30 inches of rain down here on the coast of Alabama. So it produced a lot of rainfall there. Then we have Beta. Beta formed out here in the Gulf of Mexico, moved inland, did kind of a Harvey in that it moved inland, stalled, then moved off to the northeast, and it did produce some heavy rain, nothing comparable to Harvey. If you want to know where my house is in this graphic, see that little blue dot there? That's my house. We got a lot of rain, but compared to Harvey, we had street flooding. We had street flooding in Houston. We didn't have any homes and businesses flooded. So even though it might have produced over a foot of rain in spots, we didn't have serious flooding, fortunately, from this, as opposed to, from Harvey back 4 years ago. Wasn't over yet. Here comes the next one for Southwest Louisiana. Hurricane. We ran out of letters in the English alphabet there. We only used 21 of the 26 letters. We don't have any Q or W, X, or Z, or U, or whatever, but we only used 21 letters. We ran out of them. We started using Greek alphabet. Now we're up to Delta, and that's a storm that's a little bit easier to forecast when they're doing something like this. Just when exactly are they going to make this turn? I was talking to Greg again about that. Is it going to turn? It's coming right at the Texas coast. Are we sure it's going to make that turn? And we were pretty confident it was going to make the turn and not move inland into the upper Texas coast and somewhere over here toward Cameron Parish in South Louisiana was again to be the target of this storm as well. Now, it had more rain on the western side than Laura did. It had more wind on the west side in Beaumont, Port Arthur than Laura did. This is 5 to 7 inches of rainfall, so about 2 or 3 times the rainfall from Laura, from a storm that moved inland a little east of Laura, but it was a larger storm when it moved inland, a little bit weaker, of course, but it did produce some significant damage there and more damage over in the Lake Charles area. There was not a whole lot left for it to damage after Laura went through with its wind, but it caused some additional headaches for those folks in Southwest Louisiana. Not over with yet. We're up to Zeta, I believe, here, and Zeta moved into Southwest Louisiana, and it doesn't seem like energy could get a break last year. They were all aiming for energy service area all along the coast there, from the upper Texas coast to Louisiana to Mississippi. And this is I don't have the official track yet from the Hurricane Center, but these points are 12 hours apart. Look how long, that's 3 to 150 miles or so between points here. It was moving at 30 to 35 miles per hour when it moved across southeast to the United States, which meant it wasn't hanging around very long, but it was carrying its strong winds well inland. In fact, winds in New Orleans with a Category 2 hurricane right here, the only hurricane force sustained winds were down here, and maybe over Lake Pontchartrain, that's close, and right over here by Gulfport, but 35, 45 mile per hour winds in New Orleans. But it was an unusual hurricane like Rita in that it had gusts almost twice and sometimes more than twice the sustained winds. Hurricane force wind gusts all over New Orleans. Let's see, some 110 mile per hour gusts down here by Belle Chase over here. Well over 100 mile per hour wind gusts on the Mississippi coast. And those winds continued inland. This is sustained winds. This is tropical storm conditions all the way up to the west of Asheville, North Carolina, in the mountains here. And if you look at the wind gusts, that's hurricane force wind gusts northwest of Atlanta. It was moving so fast that, and it had such strong winds aloft still, that the winds occasionally built down to the surface and produced hurricane force wind gusts. So quite a bit of damage to the power grid all along this area, along the path, because of that rapid movement. We're not done yet. It was rainfall. Now, this is a storm that a hurricane forecaster doesn't like to forecast. Delta was easy, you kind of curve up toward the coast, pretty easy. But you look at this storm and you think, who's going to forecast something like this? From, we do a 7-day forecast. I wish I could have done a 1-day forecast for this storm. Generally, late October, November, we're looking at one front after the other going by. And when high pressure is blocking behind the cold front, things goes west into Central America. Then what happens is the high pressure moves off the East Coast, and we have a cold front dip down, and that cold front kind of drags it up to the north and northeast and gets toward north of Cuba, and suddenly, well, high pressure is blocking it again to the north. It can't go north, or it goes west. Not only does it go west, it goes southwest into the Gulf of Mexico. And so, okay, it's stalled down there for a day or so, and we're waiting for the next cold front to pick it up. When is that cold front going to arrive? How's it going to impact it? Well, it eventually came in. It briefly regained hurricane strength here, but it started weakening because as that cold front approached it, it had increasing wind shear, and it weakened it to a tropical storm, and then it moved on through. But this is a storm. This is fitting for us, and we didn't end the year. There's iota behind this. This is in the middle of the ocean, but we didn't care much about that one. It was just a shipping interest. We do have shipping interest, but this was the last significant storm that we were forecasting for. It was a challenge. Most rainfall was there near Miami, Palm Beach, as it moved south of Florida Peninsula. A little bit on the backside as it tracked up the East Coast and began losing tropical characteristics. In that case, a lot of times the heavier rain gets on the left side of the track. That's all that happened in 2020, fairly quiet season. Nothing really happening across the Gulf of Mexico, right? What's going to happen this year? Well, we'll look at a number of things here. Is there going to be an El Nino in the Pacific? And that's important because when we have a warming of the water in the tropical Pacific, we tend to have more storms there. We tend to have rising air there, and it sinks over toward the Atlantic side. And sinking air is not good for hurricanes. That usually is a significant inhibiting factor. The reverse is true with La Nina. We have less storms in the Pacific, more storms on the Atlantic side. And guess where we were last year? We're over here in the La Nina range last year. So the temperatures forecast to rise up a bit, but really kind of stay toward neutral, not really getting to El Nino. And it doesn't look like we'll be anywhere close to an El Nino to inhibit the activity this year. Latest forecast, about a 13% chance, most likely neutral conditions. Neutral isn't necessarily good. 2005 was a neutral season, by the way, with 27, 28 named storms back then. So it's not going to be an inhibiting factor, I'm afraid. Looking at the Eastern Pacific, we can see now the water here, I can tell you, is a lot cooler than it was last year at this time. And so there isn't any sign of a warm up down here in the tropical Pacific. It may be good news for Hawaii because with cooler water out here, we'll have less threat over here toward Hawaii if any of you are planning a trip over there during hurricane season. One of the long-range tool that we use is something called the Atlantic Multidecadal Oscillation, AMO for short. It's a current that's driven by salinity. It tracks north along the surface of the ocean here. The warm, salty water is more dense than fresh water, so it eventually comes up to the North Pole here, or the Greenland, Iceland area. It sinks and moves back down, and as it does, it brings a lot of warm water farther north into the ocean. It enhances hurricane activity when it's a warm cycle. We tend to have about twice as many major hurricanes during a warm cycle, but guess what happens to all this warm water when it hits the ice up here? What happens with the ice? Well, the ice melts. When the ice melts, the water becomes less saline, it slows down again, and we go into a couple of decades of a cool cycle with less hurricane activity. And we can follow the pattern of these over the past. This is from 1950, but the data go back way below before that. And we can see we've been through warm cycles and cool cycles, and a warm cycle that definitely started in 1995. Now, we've been discussing whether this cool cycle started here in 2013 because, well, we kind of had a few storms since then and didn't really behave like we're in a cool cycle yet. But even during a cool cycle, we have periods when the water temperatures or the Atlantic multidecadal oscillation is in a warm cycle. And if we look real closely, in 17, Harvey, 19, and 20, just during the hurricane season, it shifted back to a warm cycle, which wasn't an inhibiting factor. What is it going to do this year? Well, the place we look for cooling is up here. And what do you see? I don't see any cooling up here. I see above normal temperatures up in the northern Atlantic, significantly above normal temperatures here. And usually that signifies that the Bermuda high is going to be a bit stronger. And in this case, well, we have slightly cooler water down here. It looks like we might have a more hostile environment east of the Caribbean again this year. And like I said, that's not good news because we want them to develop way over here by Africa so that they can track out in the open ocean. So I'm afraid we're going to be looking at more development farther west again this year, just as we did last year. European model, and I just got this today. So Jackie, if you have my charts here, you don't have these because this just came out today from the European model, and it now goes through the end of the season from June through November. It's now forecasting 17 named storms. Now, last year it forecast well below normal activity. It didn't do very well then. Now, this year it's now up to, last year it was forecasting only 11 named storms for the season, and we had a couple more than that. 17 this year for tropical storms or named storms here. For hurricanes, it's now up to 9 hurricanes forecast this year. Last year at this time, it was forecasting only about 6 hurricanes, and it certainly blew that one last year. So it didn't do well last year because I think it incorrectly predicted that we might have an El Nino, and that never developed last year. So it's forecasting above normal. My longtime co-worker, Fred Schmoody, and I talked about the analog seasons, and I've worked with Fred since 1990. He looks at all kinds of data and finds a year in the past that has a similar setup to what we're seeing right now. Similar El Nino or La Nina or neutral in the Pacific, similar flow patterns, similar temperature patterns in the Atlantic. And when we find one of those years that, well, it looks like what we're seeing right now, we can call it an analog season, and we can equate maybe this year's activity will be somewhat similar, maybe a similar number of storms, maybe development in similar areas. And these are the years here that we've identified, and the best analog that we could find was 2008. And we had Dolly hit the lower Texas coast, Gustav hit the middle Louisiana coast of the Cat 2, and Ike hit the upper Texas coast as a Cat 2, but a very, very large Cat 2 with hurricane force winds extending out 120 miles from the center. 2005 is in there as well as an analog season. Not as good as 2008, and I don't necessarily expect we're going to have that many storms. I certainly hope not this year. I hope we have a little bit quieter period. And it might well be a little bit quieter start, I'm thinking right now from what I'm seeing, and I'll certainly appreciate that. So as far as more active, less active, we have that possible cool phase. I wouldn't put much hopes in that happening. I'm afraid I don't see any signs of it switching over. It looks like it's kind of still edging toward warm phase, not fully into that cool cycle of the AMO yet, I'm afraid. We're not going to have El Nino to inhibit the activity. We have above normal water temperatures throughout the tropics, plenty of heat energy available, except that main development region may have some problems again this year. All the analog years say active, the European model saying active, and we're going to have more storms than we had in the past because we're simply naming things that we would never have named in the past right now. We're detecting things we couldn't have detected in the past. So you can forget the old 9, 6, and 2 for averages. That's not the case anymore. We just have more named storms because of the weak storms we're detecting, the subtropical storms we're naming now. Excuse me. The new normal, we go use a 30-year normal for hurricane activity. 14, 7, and 3, and that's mostly during that warm cycle started in 1995. And there's some talk about using a 50-year period instead of a 30-year period for hurricane climatology. But in any case, if I could pick one area that might have a little less chance than normal of being significantly impacted, it would be from the Dominican Republic over here toward Trinidad, because I still think this might be rather hostile east of the Caribbean Sea. But I think it's going to be active and favorable in the Western Caribbean Sea, which means the Gulf is going to be open for business. And my longtime coworker, Fred Schmoody, is saying that we may have a trough over the Ohio Valley this year, which may enhance activity more so along the east U.S. coast than we saw last year. We're a couple of them up there, Faye and Isaias, but nothing very strong, or nothing too strong. But it might be a greater risk for a stronger storm on the east coast this year. Phil Klotzbach, you all know Dr. Phil Klotzbach, used to work with Dr. Gray over at Colorado State. He's Dr. Gray. He died, I think, 6 years or 5 years ago this month. Well, Phil Klotzbach took over from him in the seasonal predictions. He was working with Bridgewater State University, and based upon the seasonal forecast, coming up with probabilities of hurricane passing within 50 miles of the state border for all these states. And you can see what stands out here: Florida, next is Louisiana, and then North Carolina, which typically has them grazing the Carolinas and not necessarily making landfall, but I guarantee you they don't graze Louisiana and Texas and not make landfall. So they're certainly a greater than normal risk for impacts here on the Gulf Coast. If we look at the major hurricane chances here, from 14 up to 21% for Texas, and significantly higher for Louisiana and Florida as well. You don't see any state here along the U.S. coast that has a less chance than normal. So everybody is above normal risk for a hurricane passing at least within 50 miles, or a major hurricane within 50 miles of the coast. So it is going to be an above average season. Those are the names for this year, all the way up to 21 names here. And if we happen to go past 21 storms, and let's hope we don't do that again, we're not going to use the Greek alphabet anymore. And I'm thankful, because I actually got one email that asked me why the Greek alphabet wasn't in alphabetical order, because Eta came after Zeta or something like that. And I'm saying, well, the Greeks think it's in alphabetical order. You know, their alphabet is different from ours. Fortunately, somebody else answered that email. So I didn't have to tell them, you idiot. It's a Greek alphabet. We're going to use supplemental names. These are the supplement. I don't know who developed these as supplemental names, but if we go past 21 named storms, that's going to be the storm that we're going to see the names this year. And I hope we don't see any of these ever in our lifetimes here in the Atlantic Basin. So with that, I think I'm on time here. It's was it 12:52? We have time for some questions about anything. Cindy, I see you at the mic.
Question. I'll be glad to pass it on to Chris.
You can also type in chat if I can figure out where that is. Oh, there it is. It's on my other screen.
Yes. Chuck Mason would like to have you define analog seasons as well. He said that didn't quite understand that part of or missed that part of the presentation. Analog seasons.
An analog season is we look for some season in the past that has a similar setup near the start of the hurricane season. Similar jet stream flow patterns, similar water temperature patterns across the Pacific and Atlantic. It looks like what we're seeing right now. And if the tropics look like what we're seeing right now in these previous years, then maybe what we're going to have in the future is going to be similar to what these years in the past with a similar setup produced. So that's what we call an analog season.
We have another question for Chuck. Have a slide for last year's comparisons on the analog season
I
from prior.
I have one on my computer, but I
With
know the
technology,
analog.
we have high expectations now, Chris.
I know that they were above normal as well last year, the analog seasons, and I don't remember exactly which year it was. I think 1996 was in there. You don't remember 96, but I remember a couple of strong hurricanes hit the East Coast in 96. And we did have a couple of, well, one hurricane hit the East Coast this past season, but I don't remember the exact seasons, and I could pull it up, but you don't want to see me looking through my computer.
Well, if you come across it, yeah, Chuck just wanted to put you on the spot, but if you find it, Vernon said you can email it to him and he will get it to Chuck. Any other
Right.
questions? Sherry Pierce? Why do they skip letters?
They skip letters like U and Y and X. See, not W. Well, I'll go back to the names. I don't remember which letters they skip. Yeah, U is missing. V, W, X, Y, and Z are missing as well because there aren't that many. They have to alternate male and female names, and there really aren't. There's not too many available names with those letters starting. You can think of one or two, but then, well, of course, hopefully we don't have to retire them, but they don't have as many of those names. And really, when this list was, when we decided on the 21 letters originally, we were usually stopping somewhere over here toward the beginning of the second column. We weren't ever getting over here toward there, but we're naming more systems now. And now we're starting to use some of these latter names in the list here. It tried to think of 4, 5, 6 names starting with U or with Z. You can probably think of a couple, I don't know, Zoe or something, but think of a man's name with Z. I don't know. I can't think of anything. That's why they don't use
They're
those.
on it.
I know there are some around, but they're less common, particularly for the English language. I work with a guy named Zubair from Pakistan. So that's a Z name right
So we even have someone online. She's got a Z name for us too.
there. So they're not too common. And so they decided, well, we never need more than 21 anyway. So who's kidding you? Well, we do now.
Well, thank you for joining us today and sharing the news. And we thank Greg Bostwick also for being here. You are a little bit calm throughout the storm, and we have to go through the situation, so we appreciate that too. It's so nice to know that you and Chris communicate on a regular basis. So keep trying to give us the best information that you possibly can. I found the slides quite fascinating. It was almost like an kindergartner art exhibition in some places. I don't see how you could predict. One of them I thought kind of looked like a seahorse too. I mean, that's
yeah, that last, that was Ada, I think it was. Yeah, that wasn't a fun one to forecast. You know, we already had a busy season. I didn't have any days off all summer, and we get into that and trying to figure that out. That was hard.
definitely a challenge. Thank you for what you do. In your honor, we're going to be making a donation to the Rotary Foundation in our newest area of focus, which is supporting the environment. So thank you, Chris, for joining us again on your 15th occasion to share your knowledge with our club.
All right, well, thank you. Well, I hope that we'll all be there in person this next year. I'll reserve it on my calendar the first Wednesday in May. I'll put it there now. So you're first in line.
Good. Put it down because Vernon is going to make you a new certificate next year. So you can add it on your wall.
All right. Well, I look forward to seeing you all in person this next year because it's kind of hard. I don't like presenting in this way. I can see a lot of you now, but I can't tell when everybody's laughing at my jokes. I just assume you're all laughing hysterically.
You had very good response on this side in case you couldn't pick that up.
Well, you have to have fun. I mean, this is a serious business, but you gotta have a sense of humor sometimes.
And if you could direct the storms, you know, they did flood our building out a couple of years ago. So we had to, we were displaced for us a little bit. So hopefully this year will be
I'll try to keep
our
them
area.
further away from you this year. How about that? And maybe even away from energy if I can. I know energy has
Oh,
had a lot
yes.
of practice.
Energy had it rough. Our speaker next week is going to be a program from our very own Arnold Almquist on In Polio Now and the polio campaign. Let's close the meeting all together with the four-way test of the things we think, say, and do. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you all for attending Rotary today. Go out and find opportunities to lead and serve.
Okay. Okay, Chris, thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris.
You got it, Chris.
All right, we'll be talking. I'll see y'all next year in person.
Looking forward to it, Chris.
None of this Zoom stuff.
Got it.
Everybody ought to be vaccinated by then. We'll be fine.
And make sure your chat's there too.
No, she's gone. Oh, no, she's hiding underneath the blanket now.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Just a lump in the bed.
All right, Chris, take care, buddy.
All right, goodbye.
Bye.
I gotta run.
Okay, it's so good to see you. I told the lady, I said, I want some happy flowers. When I went in there, she thought